Get that fucking trash out of your life. You have legacies to build. We grew that business from 3.4 million to 17.1. Horsepower, not horse shit. You want to be the parent that's an ally. They don't need another fucking friend. Not everybody's cup of whiskey. Toughest advice for the toughest businessmen. Be relentless. Georgia football head coach Kirby Smart, who is a Nick Saban disciple from Alabama originally. One of my all-time favorite badass college coaches. Smart really is a tremendous recruiter. He's a tremendous coach, and he's completely transformed the Georgia program, exactly like his mentor, Nick Saban, did when he came to Alabama. It doesn't happen overnight. It basically takes 3 to 4 years to get your class of athlete that you want. You can see Deion Sanders doing the exact same thing in Colorado, flushing out, 35% of his scholarships before they played a single game, and being criticized for it. Prime time is being criticized, and people are. It's a head scratcher, right? Why would Deion Sanders be getting rid of so many players from the Colorado program before he's even coached a game? Well, the fact that they won one game last year, the fact that their record over the last decade is not something that anybody would want to admit to, might be part of the mindset of a true champion in primetime Deion Sanders. I think that people forget Saban's first 2 and 3 years in Alabama, where he lost to small schools, where he had inherited the previous coach's players, their culture. Smart went through the same thing at Georgia. It takes time. Krzyzewski back in the day went through the same thing at Duke. Bobby Knight went through the same thing. It's just endless. It's not an overnight thing. They come in, they change the culture, and it literally takes years to get to that championship level where you can compete for a championship. If you do it all right, it only gives you an opportunity to win. And that's what it's all about, giving yourself the best chance to win. That's what Saban has done over the years at Alabama. That's what Kirby Smart is doing at Georgia, back-to-back national championships. That's what John Wooden did at UCLA basketball back in the day. Krzyzewski, you just go down the list of winners. And the years that it took to bring in the right people, the years it took to surround themselves with winners, and years to get rid of the losers. Like the great Dallas Cowboy head coach Jimmy Johnson took the Cowboys from 1-15 to back-to-back Super Bowls in 4 years. And he was asked by reporters, Jimmy, how the hell did you take the Cowboys from the outhouse to the penthouse in 4 years? And he said, simple, I got rid of all the losers. But he didn't do it in year 1. He didn't do it in year 2. He didn't even do it in year 3. It was like a 3 to 4 year process to get rid of the losers and to draft and develop the Troy Aikmans, the Michael Irvins, Emmitt Smiths, all these future champions. And it's the same in college. You need to be into your 2nd, 3rd, and 4th recruiting class before you're really going to have a chance to compete for a national championship. The great hockey coach at Michigan, Red Berenson, said it best. The coach who has the best players getting off the bus usually wins. That was always inspiration for me to be the hardest working recruiter, to be the smartest recruiter. When I was coaching pro and amateur hockey, I had to recruit my players. I wasn't coaching at the NHL level. I was coaching at the 3 levels I was coaching in the outlaw leagues. I was coaching, it was like the Hatfields and the McCoys on most nights, a lot of red snow. And it was like the wild, wild west, but I had to recruit my players every year. When I owned my 2 hockey franchises, I had to recruit my student athletes every year to play. These kids are aged 16 to 21. So I was a badass recruiter. And I always kept in the back of my mind what Coach Berenson said: the team with the best players getting off the bus will often win. Then you gotta pull it all together like Saban and those guys do, like Smart, like Krzyzewski, like all the greats, Wooden. And then, but if you don't have the players, if you don't have the skill, if you don't have the commitment, if you don't have the killers on your team, then you truly do have no chance to win. So it reminds me of my friend Dwayne Casey when he was hired to take over the Toronto Raptors 15 years ago. The Raptors were the disaster of the NBA. And the reason Dwayne Casey was hired to fix the embarrassment of the NBA was Dwayne was the assistant coach the year before with the Dallas Mavericks. And Casey worked for Mark Cuban because Mark Cuban owned Dallas. Cuban built that up over 10 years. He had bought, Dallas back in the day when Cuban bought that team was in the outhouse. They were the worst of the worst. And Cuban turned that entire culture and franchise on its head. And finally, after 2 decades of working, they won an NBA championship. And Dwayne Casey was the assistant coach in Dallas that year. And he was the mastermind behind the defense that they played. Casey has always been known as a defensive guru, defensive wizard. So after they won, Cuban's team and Casey won the NBA championship, of course, the other teams come calling, right? They want to take your coaches, they want to take your staff. That just comes with winning. So Dwayne Casey was hired by the Toronto Raptors to do what they had done in Dallas. And it's interesting because Dwayne spoke at one of my Mastermind events years ago in Toronto. What an amazing, amazing guy. I did not know him at the time. We were in Toronto. There was 18 of us insurance agents, and we were over at the Westin Hotel. And it was a 2-day closed door mastermind where we all get up and you have a 45-minute hot seat. So basically 18 insurance agents do an 18 hot seats over 2 days. But one of the most exciting parts of a closed door mastermind is I always bring in a pro coach. If I'm in Boston, I bring in the Bruins head coach. If I'm in Chicago, I brought in Mike Ditka. If I'm in Toronto, well, I'm going to bring in the Raptors or the Leafs coach. The guys love it. I love it. And it's the sizzle, right? It's the sizzle. So it was amazing. I was like, okay, I want to get either Dwayne Casey or the Leafs general manager, Brian Burke. I'm going to get one of the two. And I'm willing to pay for these guys to come and present, right? So it was interesting. I sent a simple email to the Raptors. And this is the first year that Casey's there. It's coming up to the end of his first year. Dismal year his first year, just like Jimmy Johnson, when he was 1-15 that first year in Dallas. Just like Saban's first year in Alabama, just dismal. So you email a franchise, you don't really expect, the head coach or the general manager to get back to you. You just don't. It's like, I'm like, this is going to be a 5-step process, maybe a 10-step process. But this just speaks to the quality of a guy like Dwayne Casey, these men that are winners, these women that are winners, the high quality of integrity that they have. So I send an email to the Raptors, and we get an email the next day that says, Dwayne Casey would love to come and present to your group. He doesn't know us from Adam. He doesn't know really what he's getting into. And he said, what dates Mr. Casey would like to know, Coach Casey would like to know, what dates and stuff. So we give him the dates, and my assistant does all that stuff. And lo and behold, he's in. He's like, Dwayne would like to talk to Michael. So we set up a phone call for maybe a day or two later, and I give Dwayne a call, and it's in the afternoon after practice, and he's like, we introduce each other, and typical coach, right? High energy, positive, wired for sound. And he says to me, he's like, Michael, I'm happy to do this. Tell me a little bit about your group. I tell him about the insurance guys. And then he's like, I'm like, Coach, how much do you charge? I said, I want to pay you for your time. He's like, Michael, no. He said, I insist. He says, I'll volunteer my time. He says, if you really want to do something, he says, make a donation on behalf of the Toronto Raptors to whatever you want. And I said, well, what would you like? What would you like as a, he says, I support the Sick Children's Hospital in Toronto. So I'm like, Coach, I'm going to make a donation on behalf of our group to the Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto. He goes, fantastic, Michael. I really appreciate that. I'll see you 2 months from now, day and time. And thanks for inviting me. Him thanking us for inviting him. So this is a guy that's, he's making probably $8 million a year. He's on a 5-year contract. He's moved from Dallas to a new country, and he's coaching the worst team. He's rebuilding the worst franchise in basketball. It's either that or Charlotte at the time. So he has the time to come over and speak to us. And I've shared this story a few times. So we're going to the last Raptors game of the year when this event happens. It's the very last game. It means nothing. It's the Knicks and the Raptors, both non-playoff teams. And Casey has gone through a brutal first year. They're no good. And that was predictable, right? It's a 5-year rebuild. So he shows up right on time, 2 months later, walks in the front of the Westin. My wife brings him in, right? And she's like, Coach is driving a 1/2-ton truck. And, my wife usually doesn't comment on people's vehicles. She's like, no, not like an F-150. He's driving a 1/2-ton truck. And immediately she loved Coach Casey, right? She loves this guy. And Krista has a sixth sense for people that have integrity and honesty and big hearts. She just has it. And she brings him down to the room, and he walks in this conference room, and it's a beautiful room. We're overlooking Lake Ontario, and it's glass wall, and Coach Casey gets up at the front, and I have the 2 tall bar stools, and we sit there, and we chop it up for the next hour. Like, we literally 2 guys sitting up there chopping it up for the next 2 hours, or an hour, and guys taking notes, right? And what's great about these mastermind sessions is it's not like them talking to the media. I've been in pro sport and amateur sport for 31 years, so I know the questions to ask. They can't buffalo me. And it was like Dwayne and I were sitting in his home basement bar, or it's like we were having lunch at a pub. Like, literally, he was sharing all the details of this first year journey. He talked to us about working for Mark Cuban. He talked about how Cuban was in the gym at 5 a.m, 2 hours before the players, that nobody could outwork Mark Cuban. He talked about how everything was about excellence in Dallas. The private plane they had, teams didn't have that 20 years ago. The locker room, the towels, the hotels they stayed in, the food they ate, everything. There was no detail too small for Mark Cuban. And then he told us about coming to Toronto, which he knew a little bit. He's like, this is going to be hard, right? You're going from the penthouse to the outhouse. That's the challenge. And he said, Michael, I've never been more exhausted in my life. He says, I've only been here for 8 months, and it was the right decision to come here, and I'm loving it. He says, but I'm so exhausted. And then he tells us the story. He's like, everything. This is off the cuff too. This is after he talked to the group. And I tell him a little bit about my hockey coaching and all this other stuff. And he pulls me over the side, and he just loves to talk like any coach, right? And he's like, Michael, he said, Toronto. He said, I knew it was bad, but he said, I had no fucking clue. He said, you want to talk about losing? He says, I walk in here, he says, I can't even get the right towels for the players. He says, this is an NBA franchise. He said, I come here, I thought I was going to have to teach. I thought I was going to have to coach defense. I thought I was going to have to draft better players, all this kind of stuff. He goes, we can't even get the fucking right towels for the players. He said, we fly charter. He goes, these other teams have their private jets. We fly charter. He says, for us to go to LA is 2 flights. We take 2 flights like Joe. And he's like, how in the hell can you win when you are flying charter, you're staying at lower level hotels, you're not feeding your guys when they come to practice, you're not feeding them the right things, the locker room is not the way it should be, the chairs, the showers. He's like, the weight room, we have to redo the weight room. He says the practice facility is a disaster, all of it. He said, I knew I was starting at the ground. He said, but I didn't know I was starting at ground zero. And he kept going back to the towels. He goes, I saw these cheap towels, something you'd get for free if you bought a Sports Illustrated magazine back in the day. And he sees these towels put out by the trainers, these pile of white towels. And he's like, can't we get some good towels for the players to shower with? He says, where's the logo? Where's the slogan? And it's lost because this is a losing culture, right? This is a losing culture. They're good at one thing. They're good at losing. And he had to change everything. So he gets all of it changed. He gets the locker room changed. He brought the big boulder up that I talked about, the 1,000-pound boulder that he had them bring in and put in the middle of the locker room. That was his pound the rock philosophy. The stonecutter's tale, where if you hit that rock 1,000 times, it doesn't even show a crack. But then if you hit it 1,001 times, it splits wide open. So that was his theme for the first couple seasons, pound the rock. He goes, Michael, I had to have it put on towels, on t-shirts. He said, not a clue. He said, not a clue about winning. He said everything from the weight room to the training rooms to the hot tubs, the cold tubs, everything is second class. And over the next 6 years, I think it was, he built that franchise up. He won Coach of the Year in 2018. He won Coach of the Year in the NBA in 2018. And this is how fierce and tough sports is. He got fired right after that offseason when he won Coach of the Year. So he won NBA Coach of the Year in 2018. The best coach in the NBA in Toronto, 2018. What was waiting for him? His pink slip. Well, he hasn't been able to get them to a championship. He hasn't been able to get them to an NBA title. Well, he's only human, by the way. You can't make chicken salad out of chicken shit. So Dwayne gets the pipe, and lo and behold, who do they bring in as the assistant coach? The NBA Coach of the Year. The Raptors are in first place. They win a couple rounds in the playoffs, but not good enough. He takes the team from dead last in the NBA over 7 seasons into the penthouse. The only thing left now is to win it all. Well, all of a sudden they fire him, right? He's too tough, he's too hard, the players don't love him. And who gets the job? His assistant, Nick Nurse. This is where it gets really good, because he says to me, he goes, Michael, that fucker cut my throat. He said, I brought that guy into Toronto, I brought that guy into the NBA, and he goes, he was my assistant on the bench for, I think, 5 seasons. 5 seasons, Nick Nurse was Casey's assistant. He brought him in. He brought him in from the Bush Leagues. He brought him in from Europe to the greatest basketball league in the world. He brought him from the Outback into the spotlight. And he said he went behind my back to the team president and GM, and he said he cut my throat and cost me my job. If that doesn't make a man bitter, I don't know what it is, but that's certainly not the first time we've ever heard of something like that in pro sport or in business. So all of a sudden, Dwayne's fired. He's got to move he gets hired immediately by the Pistons. He's moving his family to Detroit. He calls me up and he goes, Toronto's getting Kawhi Leonard. And I was like, really? He didn't even play last year. He's like, they're going all in. He says, Kawhi Leonard's coming. Danny's coming with them. He says they're going to be trading one of their young stud players in Toronto for the whole deal. They're going for it. They want to go for it. And a guy like Kawhi Leonard, proven winner, right? A total cleaner. So they make this monster trade and bring in the missing pieces, right? They brought in like 4 new starters, not 3, 4 when it was all said and done. And to make a short story long, the Raptors win that first season under coach Nick Nurse. They win that first season in 2019, the first year that Dwayne Casey was fired. And he's like, I was thinking to myself, I'm like, how would he enjoy watching that? His team, he didn't have Kawhi, he didn't have Danny, he didn't have the guys that they brought in at the end. And they beat Golden State in the finals. They were injured, but a win is a win, and they win their first NBA championship. And that was Casey's empire that he built over 6, 7, 8 years by pounding the rock. And he's such a class guy that he doesn't hold, like he's like, oh, I'm happy for them. He goes, I'm happy for those players. I'm happy for those assistant coaches. I'm happy for the general manager. I'm happy for the city of Toronto. I'm just like, wow, what a class act. What a class act to watch his team win an NBA championship the year before he's, the year he's fired, and he still has the class and the integrity to congratulate everybody. He didn't congratulate Nick Nurse, that's for sure. I'm pretty sure I could have coached that fucking team. And I say that with nothing but malice in my heart. I mean, Kawhi Leonard was the straw that stirred that drink. And they were on a mission. They only had Kawhi for the 1 year, Danny for the 1 year, and they were on a mission to get it done. They weren't living in Canada to finish second. And like I said, Golden State was exposed. They were injured. The timing was perfect. We won our Barclay Cup hockey championship, same time. We won in April, Raptors won in May. So I'll never forget that, 2019. But I always think about Dwayne Casey, the great Dwayne Casey, building that up and him talking about the towels. Michael, they can't even get the fucking laundry right. They can't get the laundry right. He says they have the worst laundry in the league. And just all this stuff, right? He says, most teams have fruit and steamed vegetables and steaks on the flight. He says we have energy bars, candy bars, and bags of chips. That kind of stuff, right? So I'll never forget, I'll share one more story. My wife, Chris, and I were talking about this last night about Casey. By the way, he went to Detroit. He signed a massive contract. He coached there for the last, 6 or 7 years. And now he's moved up into the front office. He's finally gotten smart. He's finally decided he's not going to stand on the bench anymore, and that he's going to go up in the front office and wear a golf shirt for the next few years and take it easy. What a worker. I mean, he was trained by Cuban. All he knew was basketball. Just insane. He used to tell me about his days too. I'm like, Dwayne, walk us through one of your days. And just insane. He's a guy who, he reminds me of most successful coaches. He's like, yeah, I watch 4 hours of film a day. 4 hours of film a day. Like, that's Saban. That's Belichick. That's like in the video room. 4 hours of studying, and then they create a 30-minute or 20-minute tape out of it for the players. They know every player. They know everything. They know every sequence. They know everything. And they watch every practice, they watch every game, they break down every minute, every shift. It's just insane. So the funny part just shows you how great Dwayne Casey, the great people that we have in this world. So I make a donation for $2,500 to the Toronto Children's Hospital. I'm happy to do it, right? And he gives his speech, and I interview him, and it's just a smashing success, right? He gets photos with everybody. He's one of these guys. He's not in a hurry. He's not a professional speaker. He's just a championship coach. And so anyways, Krista has this big white check. It's like 6 feet long, and it would be like 2.5 feet high. It's one of those big checks, right? where you show in a picture, right? We gave $5,000 to the Cancer Society as an example. It's a massive dry erase check, and we always erase it and fill in who we gave our last donation to. So it says, you know, McLean Hockey, $2,500, Toronto Raptors, right? So Krista and I get photos with this of Dwayne with the big check, right? Big ass check. And then Krista hands him the actual physical check, the little check, and for $2,500, he's like, thank you. So he's about to leave, right? And he's been there for like 3 hours, and we're loving it. We're loving it. The guy just has a massive smile on his face, constantly telling stories. He pulls my wife Krista aside and he goes, Krista, could I have the check? And Krista's like, Dwayne, I just gave it to you. You have it in your hand there. It's in your pocket. He goes, no, the big one. And she's like, you want the big check, the 6-foot check? He goes, yeah, I'd like to show it to my wife and my kids. And she's like, okay, we've never done that before, and I guess we can make another one. I mean, I had it made up years ago at a sign shop. He goes, yeah, I'd like to take the check home and show it to my wife and kids, and then maybe I'll take it over to the arena tomorrow and show it to the players. Like he's a kid in a candy store. This is a guy making $8 million a year, 45 years old, one of the most respected basketball coaches on the planet. Can I have the big check? So you have to see it. I walk him out the front of the Westin, right? And he's valet parked, of course. You got the guys in the white gloves. And they go and they get his truck. And Krista wasn't joking. She wasn't joking when she said, Michael, it's not like an F-150. It's not like one of these beautiful, you know, trucks that they make today. She goes, he's driving a beat up half-ton. And I'm like, you're kidding, right? Because he talked about how he grew up poor. He talked about how they had nothing, and they had love and they had work ethic. And the guy goes and he's got the valet guy, and he brings this truck up to the front of the Western, right at the front door. And they know who he is, right? They know who Coach Casey is. And here comes this like exhaust fume dispensing truck. It's probably 10 years old. You know, it's got the dink in the door and the bumper, and here he is. He shakes my hand, just powerful, fucking powerful, and built like a friggin' machine. And he says, thanks, Michael, for having me and all this other stuff. I'll call you later. I'm like, call me later? So it's like we're friends, right? I'm like, okay. He's got my number and stuff, and it's just insane. He's like, I'm gonna call you for a quote on my house insurance. A guy making $8 million a year US in Canada, he's gonna call me for a home insurance quote, which he did, of course he did. I wanna save some money on my home and car insurance. It's just insane. So you have to see this grown man with the 6-foot check get in. They hold the door, the valet guys hold the door. I'm surprised it didn't fall, the door. He gets in, he's like, tips them, you know, like he's the man, right? And then he tries to shove this 6-foot check in the cab. And he's out front in the hotel, and he goes, Michael, I can't put this in the back because it'll blow away. And I'm like, okay, coach. And he gets in the cab and he pushes the check in with him. And he's got the check from window to window in his cab. On his lap, the steering wheel's out here. He's got his hands over the check. He's trying to put it into gear, and he's driving away home in Toronto. And he's got the check on his lap, and it's taking up the entire cab. That, my friends, is what greatness looks like. 7 years later, NBA championship, his team. Oh my God, what a great guy. Krista, can I have the 6-foot check because I want to take it home to show my kids. I want to show my wife. He's a child himself. Just the fucking best. Nope, I won't take any money for speaking. If you want, make a donation to the Children's Hospital. Man, this world is full of great people. And I have had the pleasure and the honor in sports and business in meeting tens of thousands of them. Man, there are great people everywhere. Never forget that. 5% of people messed up, but man, there's a lot of great people like Dwayne Casey's of the world. Doesn't matter how much that guy makes, doesn't matter what he wins, doesn't matter Mark Cuban's his boss, doesn't matter. He is principled, he is character, he is the man his mom raised from nothing. That's who that guy is. He knows who he is. That's a guy that, you know what? He is who he is when nobody's watching. Money didn't change that cat. That is just a principled, big-hearted guy. And by the way, you know, when they said he was too tough for the players 7 years later, shame on anybody who went behind his back and said that to the president. Gutless. That's a guy I want to go through the wall. That's a guy who's going to push me to be a champion in the NBA. That's a guy who's previously won. That's a guy who's worked for Cuban. Just tell me what to do. You want me to jump over the fence? I'll jump over the fence. You want me to punch myself? I'll punch myself. Just tell me what to do, coach, because you've already won. You're a proven winner. And then when they won that NBA championship in 19, I just said to Krista, we were there for game 5, and they won it in game 6 in California. I said, man, I texted Coach Casey. I said, congratulations, brother, on your second NBA championship. And he's like, thanks. I'm grateful for everybody and thankful for Toronto being in our life for 8 years. Just an amazing man. So today is the last day. Immigration is closing at the Michael McLean newsletter. If you want a copy mailed to your office or your home, you need to go to michaelmcleanletter.coach right now. michaelmcleanletter.coach. The link is below. And I will, it's $97 a month. It's $197 for Diamond, and you'll get a free hat this month. It's 22 pages. It's my special AI edition. I'm going to show you how to make AI your bitch. Why 99.9% will be, it will master them. It will own them. They will be a slave to AI. They will lose because of AI. And then there'll be the 1% of 1% like you that I'm going to show how to make, literally to make AI your servant. You're its master, and I'll show you how to do that in this month's publication. It's all about making yourself irreplaceable, making yourself weaponized, making yourself bulletproof, making yourself 10 feet tall. michaelmcleanletter.coach. After today, I slam the door shut, and you'll never get a copy of the May edition again. I haven't sold any back issues. If you want this one sent to your door, there's still a few hours. michaelmcleanletter.coach. $97 a month is $3.24 a day. Even a bum on the street can afford that. So don't say it's about money, just say you're not serious about winning. Because if you're serious about winning and marketing and money making and world building, well, then this is a natural $3.24 a day. michaelmcleanletter.com. And I'll throw in there a couple more professional coach stories. I got a truckload of them. There's nothing I enjoy more than talking to pro coaches off the record. Babysitting 101. Claude Julien, the great Boston Bruins Stanley Cup. He's my neighbor in Canada in the summer. And Claude won a Stanley Cup with the Boston Bruins, I think 2011. He was there for like over a decade. Amazing coach, amazing man. And he got Boston their first Stanley Cup since Bobby Orr in the 70s. And Claude came up to my office and he was telling me after he'd just won the Stanley Cup and he was home for the summer. And we talked for hours about the Bruins and all the stuff that goes on, even when you're winning, right? And he was making $5.5 million a year to coach the Bruins at the time. And he's like, Michael, I am the highest paid babysitter on planet Earth. And I started to laugh when he said that. He said, I'm the highest paid daycare worker babysitter on Earth. He said, if I told you what I did with my day with these millionaire athletes, he said, you'd have no idea. He says, we're lucky if half them can tie their fucking shoes. And he's like, I'm like, that's the best, Claude. That's the best. Because I'm coaching junior. I'm coaching the Blue Wings at the time. And I'm like, every day's a wild card. Like, they're great kids. They're great people. But honest to God, sometimes I'm not sure if they can find the rink. I'm not sure if they can spell cat if I grace them a C and a T. I'm not sure if they can tie their own shoes. That was the greatest. I'm the highest paid babysitter in the NHL. It was just tremendous, just tremendous. So more of those stories to come. Michael McLean, letter.coach. 2 words that changed my life, 2 words that'll change yours. Remember the big check, Dwayne Casey. Be relentless.